Hey guys, it's us again. Got a knife review for you today on the Spyderco Tenacious. This is a budget knife in a series of 3 by Spyderco. The Persistence, Tenacious, and Resilience. I'll go through the stats first and then I'll get into my observations. Overall length of this knife is 7.76 inches. The handle length is 4.45 inches. And the blade length is 3.39 inches, so a good EDC length. Now the blade thickness is 0.12 inches. The blade steel is 8CR13 MOV. The blade shape is a drop point, slightly different from Spyderco's other leaf-shaped blades. The grind is a full flat grind. The blade finish is satin. The handle thickness is 0.47 inches. The handle material is black G10. It is a liner lock, and that liner is stainless. The weight is 4.1 ounces. Pocket clip is 4-way reversible ambidextrous. However, it is not deep carry. It has a thumb hole instead of the usual thumb stud. One of Spyderco's few blades that's made in China. Price-wise, the best I found for this was $33 on Amazon. That's very inexpensive for most Spydercos. Alright, now I'm going to get into my observations on this knife. I think this was ingenious marketing by Spyderco, making a series of different sized, affordable, good quality everyday carry knives. The Spyderco Persistence and Resilience is like a 2.7 inch blade and a 4 inch blade, and then the Tenacious is the 3.4 inch blade. So basically it's just trying to cover all bases. If you want a large EDC knife, about a mid, or if you want, a small, nimble, everyday carry knife. Honestly, for what you're paying, this knife is an incredible deal. The fit and finish on this is amazing. For a $33 knife, you've got a full flat grind, which is granted relatively expensive to produce when you compare it with things like the hollow grind. G10 handles, relatively thick steel liners, they are skeletonized. Even though it is a liner lock, you've still got 4-way reversible pocket clip and a decently wide blade, so you can sharpen this down a lot without having to worry about, grinding your blade to nothing. Also, this is the smoothest $33 knife I have ever handled. One thing that I sort of noticed that was a little off was the Tenacious, Resilience, and Persistence don't go together grammatically. It would make more sense if they said Spyderco Tenacious, Persistent, and Resilient, or Spyderco Persistence, Resilience, and Tenacity. So I don't know what they were thinking there. Just something I've noticed that I didn't see in any of the other reviews. Something to be mentioned, full flat ground blades are excellent slicers while still being durable. In terms of the steel is really where this knife falls short. 8CR13 MOV, in my experience, is a very bad steel. It's softer than 440. You're going to have to be taking good care of this edge. However, when this edge does get dull, it's a lot easier to sharpen than D2. Now, 8CR13 MO is different from 8CR13 MOV. Obviously, it's missing vanadium. Vanadium improves wear resistance, it improves the toughness, and it retains the ease of sharpening without having to lower the Rockwell hardness. The steel is really the only area in which this knife is lacking, that and the liner lock. Thumb hole is typical Spyderco. It's sort of their signature. Personally, I prefer thumb studs a little more, simply because thumb studs sort of stick out, whereas this is something that goes in. So your thumb has to work harder to go down far enough to grab, whereas on a thumb stud, your thumb can't even go this way without hitting the thumb stud. However, this thumb hole is very exposed, and it's not hard to get your thumb in there. It does work very well. One thing that people sort of don't like about full flat grinds is that it's very hard to sharpen on a clamp system like the Lansky, the Wicked Edge, because you've got to be able to clamp a flat part of the blade. This is called the blade flat. Right here, this part of the unground steel, this is called the blade flat. That's where the Lansky sharpening system is supposed to grab onto so that you can keep your angle straight and grind to sharpen your blade. You can't really do that on a full flat grind. It's just very difficult. There's nothing to grab onto and it moves around and screws up your angle and it just doesn't work. A lot of people have been trying to figure out a way around this. Some people have resorted to grinding a flat surface into their blade, which I think is way overboard. Something that the Tenacious may have indirectly done to counter that was they extended at this very sharp angle the blade flat. So you can put your clamp right here going this way, have it centered there, you're going to get a good centered grinding point. Now, something to notice about this blade, the spine is much less curved than the belly, which I think is great because it gives you a little more control over the spine, gives you a longer blade, and yet you've still got a nice curved belly so that you're never going to have to worry about any inward curves preventing you from sharpening on a stone. Now I'm going to go over the handle. So the handle is a little less ergonomic than a lot of Spyderco's knives. It doesn't have the very characteristic finger choil up here that you see on like the Mannix, the paramilitary. It's sort of just a much more generalized shape, but it does fit the hand very well. It has a little bit of a lip right here to prevent your hand from going out onto the blade, and it has a really generous thumb ramp. One thing that I noticed about this thumb ramp is that you can see from that line right there, the grind line, it's angled forward. A lot of knives have a thumb ramp that's sort of back. For example, right here, this is its thumb ramp right here. And if you'll notice, the edge is all the way over here. So you're really still not even getting very much control over the spine of the knife. If you look at this, the thumb ramp is directly above the edge. So by the time your thumb reaches the thumb ramp, you're already on top of the edge, which is excellent design in my opinion. You've got a lot of control. The jimping isn't quite as aggressive as it is on the Mannix 2, paramilitary, the military, domino, things like that. It's not quite as aggressive. It doesn't grab into your thumb. And that jimping only comes from the blade. There is no jimping on the liners other than this right here in the liner lock. And that takes me to the locking mechanism. The locking mechanism is a liner lock, which in my opinion is one of the worst locks out there. Typically very flimsy, but let me say this is a very good liner lock. These are very thick liners, and even though it is a liner lock, which usually hinders with the blade centering, it is pretty dang close. For a $33 knife, that is excellent. So despite having a liner lock, it's still very centered. It locks up tight. There's absolutely no blade play side to side or back and forth, and it's still smooth like this. It's amazing. I mean, just for that, if you didn't have, you know, all the other features that come with this knife, just for that, that would be worth the $33. I mean, it just feels like a much more expensive knife than it is. Something I have to give for this liner is that it has a very generous choil right here for your thumb to grab onto the liner. A lot of knives really don't do that with a liner lock. For example, this one. There's just this tiny little piece of steel that protrudes out from where this frame is. This is a frame lock. It's very similar to the function of the liner lock. But with this, it's a lot of steel exposed on the liner for your thumb to grab onto and push it over. Along with that, this has jimping. A lot of the cheap liner locks and frame locks out there won't have jimping. Now, one small reason that I don't really like the liner lock is that the locking mechanism is asymmetrical. So if you look at something like the axis lock, everything is symmetrical. It's just a bar that comes out just as much on either side, directly on top of the blade, and it's preventing it from moving forward. Whereas this liner is sunken in, and this liner is solid. So when you put this under severe strength tests, the blade tends to buckle sideways, whereas something like an axis lock, arc lock, the ball bearing lock, they're symmetrical, so they tend to have a lot more strength. Then again, this is not made to be a hard use knife. This is an EDC knife, so that's not really a huge blunder. Another thing I got to say about these liners is that they are milled out. They are skeletonized to a degree. It's not, you know, super light, but they do have small circles milled out to reduce weight. G10 is a very popular handle material. It's a very lightweight, grippy, detailed plastic. It can take a form very precisely, and it's very popular, especially black G10. It was a brilliant move by Spyderco to use black G10 on their budget series. However, one thing against the G10 is that this is not super grippy. This would be like, maybe a C- for grippiness on this G10. And there's very little attention to detail. The only other, rounding this G10 gets is right here along this finger choil and right here, and then there's just light machined rounding around the edges of the G10 just so there's no severe hot spots. Now I'll go over the pocket clip. This pocket clip has 4 positioning holes, so it is reversible 4-way, which is excellent. I mean, it's really accommodating lefties out there. However, being that it is not a symmetrical locking mechanism, it's not completely suited for lefties. Also, something to note is that depending on where you have the pocket clip, if it's up here on either side, the hole in the middle of the pocket clip is going to be around the axis point. So you're actually going to be getting a little bit deeper carry if you have it tipped down. I know a lot of people like to carry it tip up. I usually carry it tip down. Another thing about this is that I'm very glad they went with this type of pocket clip. A lot of Spydercos have the wire pocket clip, and I really don't like those. I see a lot of knives, they have like a mangled wire and they just don't work anymore. They don't hold the knife, they don't grip the material that it's clipped onto. Whereas a standard pocket clip, a piece of metal, is, in my opinion, much better. Now, something to mention about this lanyard hole, it's not nearly as big as what you'll see on the Mannix. You'll maybe be able to fit, one strand of 550 paracord through there. Now, this knife does have 3 body screws along with the axis. Sort of surprised they didn't have any body screws up here because this is where most of the torque is happening. I'm going to give you guys a close-up of this knife. So there's that full flat ground blade. G10 handle scales, full steel liners. There's that liner lock. And there you'll see it says China. Right there you'll see it says 8CR13 MOV Spyderco. If you'll notice, something that may have been a mistake or a slight oversight, this lip right here doesn't line up. You can tell it's the same shape when you line it up right there. However, that's not the locked position. That is. It's just a slight oversight. It's definitely not a big deal. It does not in any way compromise the functionality of that stopper. Alright, if you're looking for a cheap but great quality knife, even though it does have a cheap steel, it has a wide blade, so you've got a lot of room to grind if you need to. G10 handles, full steel liners. It's got a nice thumb ramp, great use of all the steel they've got here. It's almost a 1-to-1 ratio of handle to blade. It's easy to carry, it's lightweight, and the fit and finish on this for $33 is amazing. I can't stress that enough. It's smooth as butter, and these liners are perfectly fitted to the G10. It's wonderful fit and finish. It's almost perfect centering even with the liner lock. So excellent move by Spyderco there. This is the Spyderco Tenacious. $33 on Amazon. This has been Ice. Thanks for listening, guys. Please comment, rate, and subscribe.